Hello, this is Gavin Palmer with Hero Looking for Group. So this is Jacob's channel, and you can see that 7 hours ago there was this Genesis 26 video, but there's also a video here, and this was 11 hours ago, and why isn't it visible? Maybe it's unlisted? I don't know. But basically, I want to title this Jewish Friend Accepts the Teachings of Jesus. And let's try to find where Jacob begins talking.
It looks like we are live. I just wanted to discuss the Trinity for a few minutes. So there's this idea that the Trinity is the perfect expression of love and God's love and what it means for God to love. And this idea is apparently called social Trinitarianism. I'm just going to read from the Wikipedia article. It says, the social Trinitarianism is a Christian interpretation of the Trinity as consisting of three persons in a loving relationship, which reflects a model for human relationships. The teaching emphasizes that God is an inherently social being. Human unity approaches conformity to the image of God's unity through self-giving, empathy, adoration for one another, etc. Such love is a fitting ethical likeness to God, but is in stark contrast to God's unity of being. And apparently, this has become more popular, and Bishop Barron certainly thinks that it's a very convincing argument for the Trinity, that it's a beautiful explanation of the Trinity. And honestly, this seems so wrong to me in so many ways that I kind of felt like I needed to address it. Now, in Judaism, we say that God's nature is naturally loving, and that is reflected in his role as creator, and it's very important. But whereas you have this idea in Christianity that God's love is eternally expressed by God loving himself, that's a very different understanding of the word love than the Jewish understanding.
So this idea that you can love yourself and that would be any resemblance to the best kind of love is kind of resisted by Jacob, and he would say resisted by Jewish people. And then to that, that seems like a way of thinking where you are trying to put yourself into the mind of the Creator, which is perhaps difficult. But I would just remind you that, like, the question would be, is the Creator omnipresent everywhere? And maybe even beyond everywhere, right? And so if the Creator loves you, then that means the Creator also loves himself, or themselves. I'm trying to use the right pronoun, right? And if the Creator is in the rock, then the Creator also loves the rock because the Creator loves themselves. And perhaps there's this malware that's been kind of put into you, this kind of anti-Randian malware that thinks that you have that love, and this ideal love is the kind of love that excludes the self, right? And so I would suggest that that idea of love itself should be questioned.
Understanding the word love. The Hebrew word ahava has within it this root hav, which means to give. And so we say that it is in God's nature to want to give to another, not self-love, right? Not, for a better word, narcissistic love, but love for another. And in fact,
so like if you identify as a person who is a male or female and that's how you identify yourself as, then um, loving another would be loving other people who identify as males and females. But if you identify with the Creator and a strong relationship, knowing that the Creator is in everything, then um, loving another is loving yourself. So I'm going to toss that out there.
In fact, we say that God's role in creation um, embodies demonstrates what is the greatest form of love. That's it, right? Loving kindness. Um, yes, I just mentioned narcissists. Are you implying something, Chris? Um, and loving kindness and God's loving kindness is expressed by both Him giving to someone who is undeserving, such as us, but and in charity, but also giving in the best way possible. And of course, in Judaism, we say that the highest form of charity is to give another the opportunity to earn, so that they are not embarrassed by the charity that they are given. So God gave us the opportunity to keep His commandments, and it is something that He doesn't need, but very much in a similar way as, even if you don't need something, you might hire somebody who needs the money to do something for you. God asks us to do things so that He may, in fact, give us in a manner that isn't even embarrassing. So we
So Jews have been asked to do all kinds of things, which is different than the non-Jew, who just needs to kind of follow 7 basic rules from Noah, right? The Noahide laws. So try to get into the mind of the Jew. There's all these things, all these laws for them to do these things and earn the love. So you have to kind of understand, you have to try to have empathy and get into Jacob's mind. Um, but and also Jacob he is not a father. And so, but when I think of, the Father, so he will get into talking about the different aspects of the Creator God, the one. And one aspect would be the mother, one aspect could be the father, one aspect is the Creator. So you have different aspects. And I mean, you could go on and on and on. And I agree with Jacob's points he makes later about, why stop at 3. But what I'm a father, and um, there's some things, like, there are times where my children do not want my loving attention, and there are times where they want it. And when they want it, I need to make sure that I am providing it. I try to provide a safety net, and my goal is to help them develop such that they don't need my protection as much as they mature, and eventually they don't need me to be their safety net. But I would always be there if they invite me. Because if I impose my love on them and impose the love that they haven't invited, that doesn't seem like a good kind of love. This is like the overbearing mother, or the helicopter parent. So there's a balancing act, which changes over time as the child develops, and it's unique per child. And it is challenging to try to be the ideal parent. And so I wanted to expand on this idea about earning love, and what is good love, and what kind of love does the loving God, the Father and the Mother, the Holy, what kind of love does, what is good love, right? And it doesn't have to be earned. It's unconditional, and it's unimposing. That's the kind of love that I try to embody as a father.
receive everything from God. And we still, God gives us this opportunity to show how we earn the things that He gives us, the good things that He gives us. And that is the Jewish understanding of God's loving kindness. Um, well, anti-Trinitarian how? Well, the understanding of the Trinity is that God isn't giving to um, something other. He's giving to him. He's loving of himself, right? So this idea that the all three aspects of the Trinity are God, right? And then they love themselves, and how is that? That's not love.
So when I love my children properly and they mature, they don't, you don't want them to get these long-term damage. You want them to grow and mature. This is loving myself as well, and it is also loving the world, because they become the most ideal person that I can try to help them to become, which then they become agents or actors in the world, which shapes the world, which I am a part of. So even I think the most holy love, the best love, as a parent, is to it's just natural. It's like an equation. It's just naturally going to be self-serving. When you do good love properly, it benefits everyone, and it's unavoidable. So don't be a hater. Don't hate yourself for doing the right thing.
That's narcissism. That's we can only
Narcissism is when your love is totally narrowed and focused on the self, and it excludes everything else. It would be idolatry. It excludes the Creator. It excludes everyone else. And that's from the perspective of the person who believes they are human, right? Because you're not just a human, you're also part of the Creator. But we just don't, most people just don't know it. They haven't learned how to live the right way, the truth, the life, the truth, the way. They haven't learned that. So there's a confusion. There's a kind of a false identity. I had a dream last night about people wearing a raincoat, and they're dirty under the raincoat, and they're dirty on top of the raincoat, and then they clean off all the dirt on the shell, but they're still dirty underneath the shell. But they think that they're clean. They're confused because they don't even know who they really are. So I think that's relevant here. That do you know who you really are? And then, yeah, trying to get into the mind of God is very hard. And we are ignorant. Remember, we are ignorant. I may be wrong, you may be wrong. Poking at people's axioms.
receive in being other, in being less than, and in the highest way, in being unworthy, right? If God only gives to people who are worthy, then that's not really love, right? If you if you just give people what they deserve, that's not love. That doesn't seem love at all.
It might be that the people who are worthy end up having the more difficult lives. It might be that way. Because the more worthy people are willing to take on the responsibility.
Um, and what there's a second part to that, which is going back to the whole ecclesia et synagoga, right? The church versus the synagogue. What I really start questioning the most about this concept that the Trinity is love is, well, if it is love, then and it is as important as Christians say that it is the most important thing, right? So why did God hide it from us? Why is it nowhere in the Old Testament, but it's also nowhere in the New Testament? That was a shocking thing to me. I figured that at least it would be in the Christian Bible, that Jesus would have had parables, right? That maybe the water, ice, they had ice back then too, right? Water, ice, and steam thing would be something that Jesus would have said, or that there would have been some sort of parable, that there would have been some sort of hint, and there really isn't. And we have to take a look. Deuteronomy 6:4-9 is any.
Yeah, so what Jacob's doing here is he's poking at people's axioms about the Trinity, which, I'm not I think the Trinity has risks. And that's the way I look at beliefs, is that you identify the belief, and then you and then you think about, well, what is the cost and what is the benefit? And so believing in the Trinity, I think it does have a benefit. Like there's this thing called the Holy Spirit, which allows you, I would say, to become possessed by the Holy Spirit in order to do good works. That's a good thing. The the danger, the risk, the cost is that you've put Jesus up on a pedestal, and you can make all kinds of kind of steps, danger steps, where you say, and to think the Jews do it too. For example, the one that I see Christians and Jews do is they say, I'm not going to try to be perfect like Jesus. That's what I'm not trying to be the Messiah, right? So, from my understanding, is that Jews aren't trying to be the Messiah, and there are people that call themselves Jews who are not trying to be the Messiah, and there are people who call themselves Christians who are not trying to be the Messiah. And for the Jews, if you were trying to be the Messiah, you would be wrestling with God, right? That's the Father who is training you intensely, right? And you were taking on the challenge, and you were willing to be coached and corrected. That's the wrestling, in my opinion. And then the Christian, they aren't trying to be the Messiah, right? And so if you live in a world where there needs to be a Messiah or Messiahs in order to have peace on earth and fulfill the Creator's plan, which probably could be inevitable, but the timeline moves based on how ignorant we are, how much sin we have. That means that your belief is potentially limiting, it's restricting the accomplishment in terms of, the future and when it will happen and how much progress we will have. So, that's the way I look at it. I'm not just poking people in their axiom and saying, go look at the Old Testament. I'm saying, well, what's the costs and benefits of your belief? And everybody can do this, even, atheists. Everyone can do this practice of thinking about, being skeptical and thinking about the cost and the benefits of the belief.
The incredibly central part of Judaism, not just 4 and 5, which are obviously the message, but 4 through 9, right? It says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets before your eye. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Jews have taken this rather literally, and we've taken this very literally since before the time of Jesus. So,
So Jacob's going to talk about these practices that help remind, the powerful word, the individual, the person, what is important, what should be imported into your life so that there can be transformation, so that the life of the individual is transformed, and through that the community is transformed and grows over time. And I would just add, it's like, here's a practice. This thing starts vibrating at 4:40 a.m. Right? The people who wrote this holy book didn't have this, right? So you can. It is good to have practices that remind us of what is important to allow for transformation toward the good and the ideal. There are new ways of doing it. I'm going to accelerate this part. I will share this video in the
this
description.
is Yale's site talking about the Qumran, the things that have been found.
Jacob talks about finding these phylacteries throughout history. So the Jewish people, they basically have a long history of adhering to the laws and believing that they are earning the love. And like when I look at other people's beliefs, when I look at other people's beliefs, I have to say, well, are they doing something that's wrong? That's what I ask. Like, what's the danger in what they're doing? And and that when I see what Jacob's doing or what Jews are doing, um, I don't see a lot that is wrong, right? It's not. I would see more good than bad, right? And I believe the good is more more powerful than the bad. Let's continue.
He's here. Jesus is criticizing the Pharisees, and he's saying they make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. So tefillin, phylacteries, right? He's not criticizing the fact that they're wearing them. He's criticizing the fact that apparently these people were showing off their tefillin. But even in the Gospel of Matthew, this is considered a very basic thing which Jews do. So my question becomes, how is it loving of God to emphasize monotheism, the unity of God, and taking Deuteronomy 6:4 so seriously, 4 and 5 so seriously, when he knew that the Trinity would be essential to our salvation? The number one problem Jews and Muslims have with Christianity is the Trinity. And I talk about my
I do wonder what the number one problem that Jews have with Islam. there's all kinds of religions. Like, I'm sure you have problems with all kinds of religions. I don't know if you have problems with my religion.
Michael Servetus a lot, but I think it's really important. Michael Servetus was put to death only because of his belief in the unity of God and his rejection of the Trinity. If the Trinity is that important that John Calvin needs to murder people, how is that loving of God not to plainly express this to us?
Calvin murdered a person named Mr. Calvin. Pastor Calvin murdered this person named Michael for being a Unitarian instead of a Trinitarian. I think religions have forced themselves on others throughout history, and then that ends up creating there's a debt that has to be paid throughout generations when you start forcing and imposing your love on other people. So Calvin, but you could go back, I think, to Constantine. And I would say, like, the question I have is, even the people who created the New Testament, right? And then I would even say, even the people who created the Old Testament. I see, like, these laws as potentially human beings connected to the Creator, trying to impose their love on people. Like, that's an interpretation, and I don't see that would be. I wouldn't call it's again. It's like people have beliefs. How bad is that belief? I would say, in general, I don't like imposing religion on other people. Right? Ideally, it's a choice. It's an invitation.
And I tried looking up and seeing what Christians have to say about, why this emphasis on the unity of God when.
So, I don't think Jacob is being careful when he talks about Christians, because there are Unitarian Christians, and he knows that, but he's choosing his words. He's using a definition of the word so that he can be antagonistic. So for me, a definition of a Christian would be someone who is attempting to be like Christ, a Christian. I would prefer that definition. And then by that definition, very few people are Christians, but you do have believers. You have a lot of believers, and they've just kind of, in their mind, they've limited their potential with their beliefs. And so by trying to be a Christian, you are maximizing your the potential. So, if I have a perfect relationship with the Creator, what's the maximum potential in my life? Is it that I could walk on water? Maybe. If you could believe that. I can't walk on water, by the way. Is it that I could be, leader of the country, leader of the world? Is it that I could just be a really good father, right? And raise children who do good work? But I try my best and then allow things to happen. Allow the good works to play out. And while never expecting that I would be limited or that I would accomplish a certain amount of fame or glory, right? Because it's not about the person, the servant. It's not about their fame and glory. So that seems like the proper way of being a Christian, is that believing that if I perfect my relationship, I could be like Christ, the ideal human, capable of walking on water and healing people with just spitting in their eye, which sounds kind of gross.
It's equally as important to apparently know that God is three, right? Because again, it's not
Uh,
it's the three.
I need to skip over some of this. I don't think any of this was important. Like I'm not expecting Jacob to convert, and I don't think it is important that I don't want to impose and I don't want to condemn people for not converting. But maybe just look at this as an invitation. That's all. And maybe Jacob would agree. It's just an invitation to think, right? To have empathy. So Jacob goes through, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, where Jesus himself is saying the things that the Jews believe. And Jesus never actually talks about the Trinity. The Trinity is something brought up after Jesus. And because there are risks, like the risk of the Trinity, the risk associated with believing that Jesus is beyond our capacity. So if we try to be perfect, we would never be as good as Jesus. The risk of believing that is that you actually can be like Jesus. The benefit to the authorities is that the believers they've essentially limited their potential with their beliefs. And I'm thinking about Quakers and the Mennonites, and basically all the people who have beliefs where they've in their mind have limited their potential. They don't believe they can be king, and that would be beneficial to the king. That would be beneficial to the king to not have people, and I would say it would be beneficial to the unrighteous king to not have people trying to become king. And because the righteous king would actually be seeking out the ideal king, believing that there may be a better one. And like in my mind, I know there are people, thousands of people better than me, right? So that would be the proper way of being a king, instead of discouraging people's potential by giving them a belief that would discourage them from trying their best and aiming at perfection with all of their effort. That's the risk of the Trinity.
Or foremost of all. Jesus answered them, the first or foremost of all commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. I guess there are places that omit this. This is the first commandment, and the second like it is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. So the scribe said to him, Well said, teacher, and that's my answer as well.
Is it really your answer, Jacob? Because right there it says, love your neighbor as yourself. And if you're talking about the proper love and good love, you had just previously talked about how it would be narcissistic to love yourself. So you've got this, seems like a non-complementary thinking. You have contradictory thinking. That's the way it appears on the surface. Is the word hypocrite correct? I could say that Jacob, I don't think he would be upset if I use these words.
Well said. Well said. Yet, when you talk about this scene, Christians almost never even remember that Jesus in Mark is actually using Deuteronomy 6:4. This is in Matthew 22:34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophet. Which
I like these. I remember reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and enjoying a lot of what Jesus said, if not like most or all. Obviously, there's an interpretation layer of the 17-year-old and the 20-year-old, and every time I go back and read it, I'm interpreting it different. And then every time I tried to get into the one, I would jump ahead to Revelation, right? And it doesn't make sense. And I see the New Testament similar to the way I see the Old Testament, is that people who were inspired, trying to have the best relationship they could, were having an impact in that time and that place for those people. And then people came after them who probably weren't having as good of a relationship, who were doing things like trying to limit the potential of people and restrict them, provide rules and laws, which is okay. It's not, I think all things can be transformed, but as to the benefit of the narcissistic king, right, who loves himself more than everyone else and wants to limit everyone else's potential to be better than the narcissistic king. That's I think that's a narrative that you have to think about, is that these books were not written by people who, these books could have been stories and books. I should say the stories themselves could be based on people who were having a proper relationship, and then the stories were refined over time by people who were less, right? And then collected into books by people who were less, who had their intentions were not as good. So that's to me, that is a legitimate possible interpretation of holy books. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time and attention.